Hello, hello. Hi,
Hi,
Barbara.
everybody.
Hi,
Hi,
everybody.
Heather.
Thanks for being here. Today, I have a question I want us to start off with that I want you to consider, and it is, are you leading or just reacting? I'm Heather McGonigal, and this is Barbara Schindler, and we are co-CEOs at Empowering Leadership Teams. And at Empowering Leadership Teams, we believe that mindful leaders and empowered teams are the heartbeat of a successful business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love this question that we're prompting to start in this conversation today. How often in the hectic busyness that reactivity comes up so easily versus being that thoughtful, mindful leader in all situations.
Yeah, and that really is our expertise is helping entrepreneurial businesses build teams that operate as the engine of their business and become a highly valued asset to the organization in and of itself. And I love what you're saying, Barbara, what we're talking about thoughtful, mindful leaders, thoughtful, mindful choices, because what we have seen over the past decade or more working with entrepreneurial businesses and teams is that there can be, on the one extreme, a culture of just doing everything as it comes and a sense of urgency that leads to burnout and exhaustion and not as good results. And on the other hand, thoughtful leaders making good, critically thought through decisions together, making the wisest use of the resources they have, and the number one limited resource being the team itself and creating this culture of mindful, thoughtful. I think those are two key words I'm going to keep using today, right? Because they're so important to, are we making the best use of ourself and our team as we're moving forward to get the results? And let's not burn out the team along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. That thoughtfulness has to do a lot too with what am I going for? What's the
Hmm.
impact of my actions and words and even my energy, right? Like how am I showing up in this to and how is that impacting others? Because we it's surprising when you start paying attention to be
Right.
how much positive influence you can have if you take that moment to ground yourself, to center, to be clear in your own approach. I was coaching somebody today and I was going with the quote from Brene Brown of clarity is kindness, right?
Yes. Such an
And
important quote. Clarity is
yeah,
kindness, everybody.
and we were having this conversation. She needed to renegotiate a plan she had to help a friend in a business event the next day, and it was clear that it wasn't going to work for her. But our conversation was mushy. It was kind of like talking around it, and then we just got clarity is kind. And I think
Mhm.
that goes back to thoughtful leadership, right? Having that awareness that when she did reach out to her friend and was just clear, I realize now this is not going to work for me. I'm so appreciative of this opportunity, but I'm not going to be able to help and assist at your event tomorrow. It went
Well,
fine.
yeah, it didn't
it,
explode.
it actually went good. When she
Yeah.
messaged me after, and I'd actually have to say, she said, "Wow, my friend was so understanding, and this meant so much to me to not disappoint her, but she totally understood." Like that clarity, that thoughtful
Mm,
moment of how do I bring this forward, and really being clear rather than the friend being like, are you coming? Aren't you coming? What's happening in this conversation? That jumbled area is so hard. And that's reactivity. That's kind of coming from a protective place, right?
no, for sure. I think it's coming from our amygdala, which we talk about our fight, flight, freeze response. It's the human hardwiring. We all have it as the default setting. If we want to do anything differently, we really do have to be intentional and make a mindful, different choice. So I love that story, Barbara. And it makes me think of, too, I do writing. I'm a writer as well as a business coach and leadership coach. And one of my writing teachers gave us this exercise. And what it really is she gives us an amount of time to write on a topic. and she has us start, and then she pauses us and she says, "What I really want to say is," and then you're supposed to keep writing to answer that. And you literally actually write, "What I really want to say is," and then you
Mm,
write. And it helps you really clear the story and the drama and all the other interpretations. I think it's human nature when we want to be nice, kind,
mhm,
considerate, right? And we end up sort of spinning in this way instead of just really being authentic and clear, because people know what to do with that. And when
right.
we're spinning in this, and it can have positive intention of, I want to support my friend, I want to support my friend's
Mhm,
event, oh my gosh, like I really want to be a part of that, and yet I can't. And it has us get a little wishy-washy, and the wishy-washiness, I guess, in my mind and experience, is going to damage the relationship more.
mhm.
Even, and there's positive intent behind it, but it's actually going to damage the relationship, where being clear lets you really show up. Your friend will
Mhm.
appreciate your clarity. And the same in business on teams, when we're avoiding really having a conversation about something, that's not helpful. But if we can take that pause, let our emotions and anxiety and whatever might be running us settle, then we can get to, and I'll just offer that as an exercise for people. Think of, what I really want to say is, and come up with just that one sentence for yourself. What is it that you most need to communicate?
Yeah, it takes away the tension when you're talking
Mm,
about damaging the communication, the
yeah,
relationship through this process. When you're processing all the stuff that's going on that you didn't free up from all that
right.
reactive thinking and you start talking it, people are like, wow, what's going on here? And it creates a tension and a disconnect. And that disconnect harms relationship
Mm.
because now I'm like mired in my own little journey trying to find my way to get that what I really want to say right out there. I love that prompt because it just reframes the position I'm in the communication.
And I have found in my experience, why I love it, it doesn't just help with being more articulate in your writing. It cuts through the noise of all the conversation and the story that we get going in our minds when we're under stress and pressure.
Yeah.
It just cuts through it.
And we all
And
do that, by the way, right? We
yeah,
all have
it's
that.
that's our hard
Humans.
wiring. So we want to know this about ourselves and others,
Mm,
not to be harsh with one another, not to sit in judgment of one another, but to actually work with it, and therefore empower ourselves to communicate more clearly and actually have the impact we most desire.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're working with a coach like us and you're like today, this client was saying, oh, you can actually help me with this, right? We were on this call and you can process that by having somebody listen if you're
Mm-hmm.
in process, not the conversation you're going to have with the people involved, but a preparation. You can kind of hear what's going on and you can find that thread of like, oh, wait a minute, because I heard clearly this isn't going to work for you. That
Right.
wasn't quite what she
Right.
was saying in the beginning of the process, right? But you can
Exactly.
hear that. It's like, oh, the thread in here, the real thing is this isn't going to work. Let's start with that and move into clarity of the conversation and how this works in a relationship. Renegotiating agreements. I made this agreement, but it's something's changed, right? And we can work with that with the clarity. And I say the clarity has to have compassion with it. It has to come
Right.
from that connectedness. That disconnect that happens when I'm not clear, I can connect and then I'm connected to my own center, grounded enough in my heart center to have compassion for both of us. Oh, this might be disappointing, or my friend might be relieved.
But when we clearly communicate, we can help keep the relationship good and people understand. Really, avoidance can be so damaging.
Very.
So definitely don't want to, I'm not placing judgment about that either. It's human nature to show up in avoidance as well. It's a
Hmm.
stress reaction, but avoidance, it just gets messier instead of when we can lean in to being clear and direct. And so, what we really teach is, are you showing up in self leadership and teaching leaders and their team members to take that pause, to shift and be coming from self leadership, which is when you're in your prefrontal cortex. Your amygdala is not choosing your actions, you're choosing your actions through good critical thinking and deliberate choice anchored in your intention and what you're really going for. And the good news is that in business and on teams, we do have clear outcomes that we can align to. And we may get lost in the busyness sometimes, right? But we want you to notice that and pause, because when we're all spinning in the busyness, that's when we can all burn out. And instead, we want to pause, we want to take a beat, and we want to assess, what are we really going for and why, and realign to those business goals, and then realign to what we're choosing as what us as a team is working on. Making sure it's aligned to those outcomes is going to help save us from burnout, because we will have to reassess the picture often to be
Hmm.
like, is what we're working on still leading us into the right direction, into achieving the goals we're setting out to achieve?
Absolutely. Yeah. And back to that thoughtful leader, when we're conveying these changes, the avoidance, as we said, is harmful. Too direct is harmful too. Remember,
Mhm.
there's a process that we want to be thoughtful of the impact, how we meet with others. So we want to be thoughtful for a moment. In that situation, it wasn't like, hey, sorry, I know this is last minute and I can't make it tomorrow. She didn't do
Right.
that.
Yes,
Right. That would
exactly.
be like just the same as avoiding the conversation completely, maybe just not showing up or texting at the last minute. Or for a second, we were like, those one of those, like, I could just say something happened, I need to stay here for the plumber or something. And then she was like, no, because that's not the truth. The truth
Mhm.
is, this isn't going to work for me. How can I say this with compassion and connection so that I'm aware and thoughtful of how to bring that forward in the relationship? That's what was successful about this.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. And Barbara, you were talking about too how often what you were sharing a few moments ago also reminded me about how we teach that business is an ongoing story,
Mm,
and things change and go differently all the time. And when we're bringing a conversation forward to renegotiate an agreement, to adjust our plans, to talk about how things are going, we want to we teach, and it works really well, to start with what's changed.
mm,
Start with what's changed and bringing the conversation forward. And if you're preparing to have the conversation, that's what you want to ask yourself first.
right.
What has changed that I really, because that'll give you the anchor point for why you need to have the conversation you need to have, with whom you need to have the conversation, where, right? And now if you start with what's changed, people know why this conversation is happening, instead of spending the whole time listening for, like, oh no, is there a problem, what's the problem?
Like, what happened?
Da-da-da. Then they're not hearing what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you want to
Yes.
be clear yourself before you
Mhm.
go into any conversation. Get clear yourself. You can use that prompt I gave you of, like, what I really want to say is, what is it I most need to communicate now, and why does it matter to the business picture and results? Okay, great.
Mm.
And when you have that frame up, now you're ready to have a conversation about a problem you're trying to solve, something you're facing within the organization. And then you can share your thinking and the solutions you've thought of, and you can partner your thinking with somebody else.
Yeah, yeah, well said, because that clarity up front of what's changed. Because
Mhm.
as you were describing, otherwise, the person you're sharing or the team you're sharing with are spending all their time trying to figure what's changed, what's going on. And that really that just brings me to thinking about psychological safety. To have that positive impact of interactions in leadership is to be thinking about the culture that you're creating, right?
Mhm.
And just that confusion is a distraction for people are no longer connecting and collaborating. They're trying to figure something out, like what's happening now. And that idea of developing a culture that can start with what I know now, what's changed. Something has is different than we thought it was going to be. Start a culture of being able to navigate within change, which we all need to do because new
Mhm.
information, things change all the time in business, right? In life too. But the complexity and layers of business, whether you're a startup business or a third stage business, there's complexity, there's layers of action and intentions for goals and information that comes up all the time. So being able to start creating that culture of like, oh, this is how it goes, and this is how we can stay anchored, connected, and centered together to best collaborate for those outcomes we're going for.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying here about culture, Barbara. I know that so many of our clients, what they're seeking is to build that really good culture within their business. And sometimes it can feel elusive. And how do we get that? And I think for our conversation today, which is about how are you reacting or are you responding? This is critical to creating a culture with psychological safety where people share their ideas early before they're perfected, where they bring problems forward willingly. They don't try to hide missteps and hope you don't find out. They bring stuff forward, right?
Right.
All of these things. And this is the culture, a psychologically safe culture, which is a team of leaders who feel empowered to bring their best thinking forward. They feel safe enough to experiment, to raise issues. All of that gives you a competitive advantage. But in order to have it, you have to be mindful and intentional about that you're creating this kind of culture.
Yes.
And share that with the team that this is what we're going for here. We actually do want to hear your ideas early. No, we really mean it. It's okay if you make a mistake. And watch, you'll have to be okay with mistakes. You'll have to demonstrate that that's okay, right? But all of these things help free you up from a burnout culture and instead give you the kind of business that can navigate ongoing challenge and change, which really is the number one thing I think that teams and businesses need today, is the ability to navigate a bunch of complexity with others that they can do good critical thinking with as things change, go wrong, go differently. They don't get upset and spend a lot of time spinning out in all kinds of ways. No, they pause, they allow their emotions to settle. They do some good brainstorming and problem solving together, and then they have this advantage. And we want you to have that advantage. That's why we're sharing what we're sharing today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And let's just talk about burnout for a minute because
Mm,
why reaction versus respond? Optimal performance and well being must go together. We cannot have optimal performance if we don't have good well being. And that burnout spiral is that reactivity, right? That's exhausting, number one, to be consistent responding in that reactive way, like to what's next and what's next versus having that thoughtful,
yeah.
centered approach. So, one of the biggest things is we need you to be healthy in your position, in your role, in your life. That's how you are going to be the best you in your work, in your leadership, and in your team.
So, a really powerful thing that any member, whether you're watching this video and you're a CEO or you're the COO or you're on the graphic design team, one of the things that you can do that helps shift the entire culture in positive ways is demonstrate good self care, so that you are helping build that culture that benefits you but also benefits everybody else. And this can look like sharing sharing what we're going to do on our day off, or just sharing that, hey, I'm stepping away for 30 minutes to go on a walk. I will be right back. This is an easy way to help build a healthy culture is through this demonstration, and anyone can do it, and it'll start catching on, and everybody will get like, oh, we're supposed to take breaks here. We want people to know that we want you to take care of yourself, because a burnt out person isn't doing their best critical thinking or role performance. They may be getting the work done, but they will be able to do more at a higher level
Right.
when they are taking care of themselves and able to be in that well-being optimal performance space like you mentioned, Barbara. And I know that one of the things we're going to talk about today that I just want to emphasize, because you've touched on it already, but it's the sense of urgency. The danger of an urgency culture is one of the things we mentioned in what we were going to talk about today. I hope that you're really getting why we think that urgency is dangerous. And the thing is that I find kind of humorous is that often the leaders and the team members themselves, we're all feeding that sense of urgency. And
Right.
we can very quickly be more empowered by pausing and not feeding into that urgency. We really have to grow up in our ability to assess what's a true emergency in our business versus what's not, right? Because it can be very addictive to be in this sense of urgency and always reacting to the moment at hand instead of thoughtfully responding to the challenges that come up, assessing together best approach so that we aren't in that sense of urgency. We're being, again, deliberate and intentional in what we're choosing to invest our energy into and what we're choosing to respond to, and how we're choosing to respond versus react. This it gives us energy back to
Hmm.
do good thinking and problem solving and get the better results. So it's really, really important.
Yeah, I was just thinking, we talk a lot in our work about the power of that pause. And when you were talking about self-care earlier, I was
Mm.
like, one of the biggest self-care things we can do is to give ourselves permission to pause. And you can even say, hey, I just need to pause for a minute to get my best thinking here, to get my thoughts caught up. And that is, again, a thoughtful way to build a culture that it says, like, oh, I can take a pause here when it's feeling it's starting to move too fast for my own thinking, to say what I really want to convey, to share my ideas that make sense to myself, that I can articulate in a better way. It all just matches together. That mindful, thoughtful leadership makes the difference.
So we want to leave you with that thought. Are you reacting or are you responding? Are you thoughtfully choosing your response in your daily interactions with your team, with your clients, and with yourself? Because we can get tied up in a sense of urgency even just when we're alone dealing with what's on our plate alone. So it's in all of these instances to pause. Now, this isn't going to slow you down forever. This pause literally, though, helps you switch out of fight flight mode and instead be in your best critical thinking. And things are going to go a lot better from there. You
Mhm.
make a lot better choices from there. So please lean into trying on what Barbara and I are suggesting and take a pause, slow it down a bit so you can be deliberate and intentional. And if you'd like any support from us, we actually have a great way. You can go to our website, the link will be below, and sign up for a discovery call where you'll get a free call with Barbara to really apply this or anything else you're hearing and wanting support with to your role and to your organization. This is not a sales call, this is a coaching support call, because Barbara and we love what we do, and we know that when teams are operating out of the reaction mode and instead in thoughtful, mindful leadership, the experience is so much better for everyone. And we want everyone to have that better experience. We're very passionate about that. So I hope you'll take us up on the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, just want to say I look forward to hearing from you and be delighted to have a discovery call. As others said, it's complimentary and it gives us an opportunity to explore where you are, where your team is at, and what's really coming forward for your own leadership. Remember, leadership is a choice, and having to have the ability in responding through choice makes the difference. So I hope you take us up and sign up for a discovery call soon.
Yeah, and thank you, Barbara, for this time today. We want you all to have the best time in your business together. We spend a lot of time at work, right? So let's really make it something enjoyable. Solving problems with other humans actually can be fun, and you can have this whole other experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.